Hey Hexagons, I hope you guys are having an awesome day. Today I thought it would be quite topical to talk about inflation in lieu of all the money printing that's going on. However, I'm going to be talking about HEX inflation and why it's actually a benefit, not a cost. So stay tuned and I hope you enjoy the video. So if you watched one of my previous videos, I touched a little bit on inflation and how every time a dollar or rand is printed, essentially you're losing power, you're losing purchasing power. So while the dollar may be strengthening relative to other currencies, in actual fact, it's not really helping yourself. And that is why life is getting so much harder. But it seems like inflation is something that we see in all fields of finance, even something that we come across in crypto. So, for example, Bitcoin has its own inflation, and in fact, so does HEX. So, how exactly does that work? Well, with Bitcoin, we saw a very high inflation initially, and that inflation comes from the miners who are mining. Now, remember, every 4 years, it gets harder to mine Bitcoin. So initially, understandably so, there was a lot of inflation because it was easy to mine the Bitcoin, right? So that's how Bitcoin has inflation. It's through the miners. And the way that they try and compensate for that is to make it more difficult over a period of time. With HEX, we have inflation because basically we've moved from a proof of work to a proof of weight or a staking procedure where you earn an APY or a yield. So a fairly obvious example is when you stake your HEX, you know that when you end your stake, you're going to get more than your deposit. So you've minted more. There's been an inflation increase. So HEX also has an inflation. Now, if we compare Bitcoin and HEX inflation, Bitcoin's inflation as of April 2022 was 1.8%, okay? And HEX is a little bit higher, it's 3.69%. But don't let that fool you. Remember, Bitcoin took many, many years to get to the inflation that it is now. Whereas with HEX, it's actually happened in just about a year. The inflation dropped down to 3.69%. So, in this video, I wanted to cover why inflation in HEX is actually, the way Richard Hart designed it, is actually a good thing and it's actually a benefit. So the first answer to that problem is that when you stake your HEX, you could say that that HEX is burned. So it's no longer in circulation. You no longer have access to it. You've locked it up, right, for a period of time. And in return for that, you get a certain percentage of shares with which you will later be able to mint your HEX when your stake ends. What that means, though, is that while there's inflation, HEX is combating for it by having it staked away. So with that HEX out of circulation, it creates a positive pressure on the price because why? It becomes more rare, so there's less in circulation, so the price naturally will go up. because there's more demand, less supply. At the moment, only 10% of the entire HEX, more or less 10%, is actually staked. So it's not a lot, but I am going to touch on in this video a little bit later on about why that's actually a good thing for you to get in now with staking. So the second aspect with HEX inflation, which makes it positive, right? If we compare it to the Bitcoin inflation, every time a miner mines Bitcoin, now we all know that requires a lot of energy, so a lot of electricity and also machinery. It's not something you can do at this point in time on a computer or even on your phone. You need to buy a proper miner, which is quite expensive. So obviously now each time the miner gets his Bitcoins, he needs to sell it, right? He's got costs to cover. So now there's a pressure, a selling pressure. Okay, so the miners are paid to sell the price down. Okay, because they've got their costs to pay. They're obviously also doing it for money, right? When we compare it to HEX inflation, okay, you are paid to stake your HEX, right, to keep the price up. Because when your HEX is staked, it's not in circulation, it's not being sold. So you're not putting selling pressure, unlike in the case of Bitcoin. Now, the other beautiful thing about the HEX inflation is that the inflation of 3.69% is paid to stakers only. So only the stakers who are assisting in keeping the price up get the benefit of that inflation when the stake ends. So now that actually brings me to a slightly different topic, in that in our normal financial world that we've been used to, when the banks are printing money, I don't know about you, but have you ever wondered at what point does it actually trickle down to the normal everyday public consumers? And I don't think it really does. By the time it does, if at all, trickle down to the normal general working class public, okay, by the time that happens, whether it's through wage increases or however, by that stage, prices have gone up so drastically, and also interest rates on credit has gone up. So basically, the end user or the working class person is not really getting anywhere. There's no benefit they don't get the benefit of that money printing. The beautiful thing about HEX is that if you are staked and you can choose to be a staker, you can become a staker today if you don't stake HEX. And you will absolutely get that benefit of the inflation. So it's accessible to everyone and anyone who decides to be a staker. And remember, code can't discriminate. So whereas countries can discriminate against each other, and every time that America prints money, South Africa has to print money, and it has a whole ripple effect, right? With the HEX inflation, you know that you will have access to the benefit of that inflation, and only the stakers have access, the people who are actually helping to keep the price up. The other awesome thing about HEX inflation is that the 3.69% is on the entire HEX. that exists. So it's not calculated, for example, on just the state HEX, it's all of the HEX, 3.69% inflation on all of the HEX. That is for, at the moment, 10% of the state HEX. So that's why I say get in if you can, get into staking, because there's such a small amount of people staked, or such a small percentage, but you're benefiting from the entire HEX that is in existence from that inflation. Okay. The other reason why HEX inflation is a benefit and not a cost, right? Like I said, every time you print a rand or dollar, your costs are going up, or the opposite, you're losing purchasing power, right? With HEX, first of all, if you're staked, remember you're getting an APY on average of 40%, 38 or 40%. So your APY, first of all, is beating inflation, which is fantastic, right? That's why people go into gold and other asset classes, Bitcoin. In the HEX community, we get into HEX staking, so that we can beat inflation, so that we don't lose our purchasing power. The other reason why it's a benefit and not a cost is because the inflation is delayed. So it only gets minted, that inflation, when a stake ends. And bear in mind that most HEX stakes are over 5 years. So that's quite a long period. Finally, and another important thing about HEX inflation, which is probably one of the most important points, right, is that HEX has had no inflation bugs whatsoever. Okay, so since it launched in 2019, no bugs, no problems. The code is so far proving itself to be absolutely perfect. Okay, and it's been audited 3 times, 3 independent audits. So economically, it's viable. Security-wise, it's viable. Okay, if we compare that to Bitcoin, Bitcoin's had 2 inflation bugs, okay, and no audit. So that already tells you that it's a safe project. Please, guys, do your own research. This is not financial advice, and is purely for entertainment purposes. So on a very positive note about the HEX project as a whole, and just recapping also on the video that I did yesterday about the World Economic Forum, with their view on crypto is that they have unparalleled convening power in terms of being a single source of control over crypto, if that is at all what they espouse to. Then they're clearly missing the message of crypto. And as members of the crypto and Hexagon community, we need to, because crypto is going to grow. We're in the bear market at the moment, okay, but it's going to grow. We're still in the early stages, okay, and we're in the pioneering stages of crypto. And it's important that we don't let this narrative carry out. The message of Satoshi, which Richard Hart is not against, was decentralization. Remove the middleman. Okay, that's why he created HEX, because according to him, the Bitcoin miners suck middleman D, right? So we need to push away that narrative of a middleman, of a centralized control, right? Because this code is absolutely perfect, okay? Where banks can just decide willy-nilly to print money here and there if and when they like, decreasing your purchasing power and causing suffering globally. We have crypto and a space of DeFi, a project like HEX, okay, where there's no middleman, no centralized party or private entity, unelected, making these decisions, okay, where there's no discrimination. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, and it's completely decentralized. It goes against what, for example, I read in yesterday's article about the WEF, talking about its unparalleled convening power and how, in that sense, it's coming from a position of control, a single entity having convening power over the crypto space. And that's not what crypto is about. It's not what HEX is about. And my point really is that the code takes care of that. That is the beauty of this space that we are in, of this technology, of this future that lies ahead of us, where we no longer need that authority that at this point in our world is being abused. We don't need that anymore because we've reached a point where code can take care of that. So guys, I hope that encourages you, and I hope that you get your HEX and you stake it. Please do your own research first. It is not financial advice. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll chat to you tomorrow. Bye! Where banks can just decide willy-nilly to print money here and there if and when they like, decreasing your purchasing power and causing suffering globally. We have crypto in a space of DeFi, a project like HEX, okay, where there's no middleman, no centralized party or private entity, unelected, making these decisions, okay, where there's no discrimination. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, and it's completely decentralized. It goes against what, for example, I read in yesterday's article about the WEF, talking about its unparalleled convening power and how, in that sense, it's coming from a position of control, a single entity having convening power over the crypto space. And that's not what crypto is about. It's not what HEX is about. And my point really is that the code takes care of that. That is the beauty of this space that we are in, of this technology, of this future that lies ahead of us, where we no longer need that authority that at this point in our world is being abused. We don't need that anymore because we've reached a point where code can take care of that. So guys, I hope that encourages you, and I hope that you get your HEX and you stake it. Please do your own research first. It is not financial advice. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll chat to you tomorrow. Bye!